The election is over. We have been talking about the election in the United States causing a huge gap in activity. So the first thing I want to do is ask Matt, the mortgage guy, given the election is over, given that there is certainty in the results, has that spawned any more interest in buyers, maybe more sellers? Because I know you talk to a lot of real estate agents. So it has been roughly a week. We're recording this on Monday. It's 6 days ago, the election. Has anything changed, or is it still just this vacuumous nothingness going on?
You know what? It's hard to tell. I've got my small sample size of, small team with 70 or 80 pre-approvals, but it felt a little bit like, buyer sentiment was better, right? And regardless of what side you lean towards, I think that the fact that the election is over is just one less thing to be like, well, I don't know if this person gets in office, this might happen. If this person gets in office, this might happen. Like there's not as much uncertainty anymore. And so, over this past weekend, which, we're talking mid-November, like it's not an action-packed time for real estate. I saw, and maybe for me locally, it's like, it's 70 degrees and beautiful. Like it was
nice this weekend. Yeah.
That really helps. Right. So I had agents reaching out to me. I had buyers that were like, I got to get pre-approved. I got to put an offer in on Sunday. And so it felt like a busier weekend, to be honest. Does that play out across the US? I'm not really sure. Right. It's a small sample size, but buyers, when they're making such a huge decision, right? Like buying the largest asset that most people are ever going to buy, the most out-of-pocket money they're ever going to spend, tying themselves to a 30-year mortgage. Like, sometimes, if you've done 1,500 of them like me, you forget how big of a deal it is. Yeah. So people don't take it lightly. And over the last few years, what has really kind of come about is when affordability is not as good for most all buyers, we can all admit that, people are going to fine-tooth comb it a little bit. They're going to re-underwrite a deal and go, do I want to buy at 650 or should I just, pump the brakes, look at something cheaper, maybe hold off buying for 6 months? Like the biggest financial decision when, we've got the affordability kind of challenges we have right now, people are going to, make certain this is the house I really want. And I think that, interest rates are the largest driver. The second largest thing is probably like overall buyer sentiment. I think people feel relatively good that the election's over, it's been decided, and so I think it'll help the housing market. But
it's really interesting because again, we're just starting to get data. Logan Montashami from Housing Wire, Mike Simonson from Altos Research put out last week's data. And actually, inventory fell almost 2% week on week, right? So when I think about inventory falling, it's the end of the year. It normally happens. Let's not forget seasonality. So this is not abnormal. But a 2% decline is certainly more than normal. We also had less new listings last week than normal. Less pendings. It's like last week was clearly like lack of activity. But it'll be interesting to watch the next 3 or 4 weeks in the quote unquote slow season, if anything changes. And again, I want to read something that one of my followers said, which I think just goes to highlight that this buyer's markets that I've been calling about is real. So this is a shout out Annie. This came from Annie. Does anyone feel like it just might be the beginning of a buyer's market? I made an offer on a home 1 month ago. I got a message back yesterday. They are finally willing to accept now. They're finally willing to accept. But now I'm thinking I will go for even less. Right? The buyer's market's here, man.
Yeah. And what's funny too is, depending on your market, depending on how active you are, you get the news at a different time, right? Exactly. I think that a lot of people that were super active, like I've seen this. I've seen, back in early October, stuff that was on the market for 60 days. And I'm thinking to myself, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, it ain't getting better. No. As we get deeper in, if you think about Thanksgiving to Christmas, if you're listing a house, you have to sell. You don't choose to go out there and put a sign in your front yard and go, hey guys, I know you're busy with family. I know everything else is more important right now than buying a house, but like, come buy me, right? And so I think that, we're in the thick of it for a lot of people, like tons of one rental at a time people that I've talked to, in markets across the US where, offers that wouldn't even get responded to, they were so bad, are now turning into conversations. And as an investor, like that's exactly what you want, is you want, somebody, you put out an offer and there's a bunch of different things that you can get, and not exactly like this, but from a seller being F you, not even considering, to, hey, let's counter them or whatever it is. Like, sellers are starting to play ball. And I think what's happening, honestly, with this example where they come back and they go, oh, hey, we're thinking about your offer. Let's put this together. Sellers are coming back to reality. It takes sellers a while. When rates,
it's called price inelasticity. Sticky.
Right.
Sticky. Yep.
Mid-September to mid-October, rates went up. Demand dried up. I felt it. I knew that there was less buyers out there. And sellers still were hanging on to hope that, like, somebody who got that great rate in mid-September and paid $630 for the neighbor's house, they thought they were getting $632. It was a vastly different market from mid-September to mid-October. So this seller would have to reduce and probably sell for $610. For a buyer, that's amazing. For that specific seller, it sucks. But that the market is the market.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I had a conversation with Jason Pritchard, one of the guys I put on my Mount Rushmore of investors yesterday, and he's like, dude, Michael, you don't get it. I'm a buyer and a seller. He has 11 flips in progress, 9 of them in contract. And he's like, your buyer's market call was nailed it, right? He's had to pay points. He's had to do repairs, all kinds of stuff that he wouldn't normally have to do. He's taking $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 haircuts. Days on market went from weeks to 40 or 50 days. He's now not waiting for offers. He's kind of interacting with the first one that comes through.
Yeah.
But that's on the seller side.
Yeah. I want to say something on that too, because like, that's the best advice. Somebody who's active and a professional, right? And Jason does a lot of volume. So it's like, he's going to know, he's going to have a really close finger on the pulse. Local to me in Sacramento, I've got a buddy who does a lot of flips, and he told me, listen, Matt, like, they want a concession, they're getting it.
Oh yeah.
And so, like, a smart business person who just looks at it like, I want to sell this thing, it's not going to be better in 2 or 4 weeks. Exactly. If this buyer needs $15,000 in concession to make the deal work for them, take it. Let's go. Let's get this thing closed in 21 days. Capital back to me. I buy something I can rehab and put on in the spring. That's smart business people. The average seller is just like, I want my number. I think I deserve this number. That's not how it works. And so, when the professionals, Jason Pritchard, Bobby Peterson, are saying, like, we've got to reduce price and or give concessions, that's a sign that, like, if you're an agent working with a seller, you've got to somehow be able to get that into your seller's brain that we're in a market where buyers are going to get great deals. And so ORAT community should be jumping up and down. They should be hitting the streets, hitting the phones, talking to sellers, because sellers, if they want their property to move, especially the stuff that's not turnkey and beautiful and ready, write offers, get deals. Simple.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about 2025. I know you are you pay to be a part of a lot of different services in the mortgage market. What are, quote unquote, the experts thinking about mortgage in 2025? Because I saw something this weekend that inflation expectations have gone up, which is not net good for the 10-year, which is not net good for mortgages. But what are the experts thinking about mortgages in 2025? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I've listened to a couple people that I can respect. There's probably an opinion for a bunch of different numbers. There's probably an opinion for 7, for 6.5, and for 6, and for 5.5. As far as we're, there's still super optimists, right? Like, I think I got a buddy of mine who's like, those are the super crazies, right? The ones that are just like, forget everything, rates will be 5% by summer. But I think the smart money is saying that we're not going to see a huge, like, interest rate drop like a lot of people saw. But what I still think can and will happen, Mike, is that big gap, 2.6, 2.7 between the 10-year and the 30-year can shrink. It's large because of volatility. election uncertainty behind us, less volatility. You know, the Fed gets a few more meetings in, we get more readings on CPI, and there's more like certainty and less volatility around what's going on with inflation. I think that can cause, if nothing else happens, but that comes down from 2.7 to 2.2. I'm not even saying historic 1.8. I'm just saying closer to the historic because volatility's down. We can see mid 6%. We can see, 6.25 to 6.5. So I think that, that would be a healthy number where buyers aren't going to feel too stressed and strained and affordability is out of reach. But it won't do anything dramatic to the housing market, which 5.5% would. Like that would cause so much demand with no inventory to support that, and it would push prices up. So I think like I'm rooting for that partly because it's healthy for the housing market. Interest rates come down to 6.25 to 6.5 by call it, the end of summer, and there's no real, major changes to rates, just a slow trickle down.
Yeah. I'm curious. I read an article with Lawrence Yun, chief economist at National Association of Realtors, definitely the glass is half full guy for real estate. He's kind of making me feel like he thinks real estate transactions in 2025 will be above 2024. And, I know you're not an agent, but you talk with lots of agents. I just don't know how we get there. I don't know how transactions, unless rates are sub 6, are higher next year. I mean, what are real estate agents saying in this market?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of real estate agents are, glass half full, especially if you think about the real estate agents that are left, the ones that are still operating. Quite honestly, they are the ones that are optimistic. They are the ones that are out there, doing the work, trying new things, helping, different buyer segments. And so they're still active and closing deals. The ones that, are slower and are transitioning to a full-time job because they only closed 2 transactions in 2024, like they're probably out. Part of it, 2024 from a real estate transaction perspective was pretty slow, right? And so, for it to go, I could see it going either way, Mike. And, if rates just stayed at 7% for the next 9 months, 2025 would be less real estate transactions than 2024, for sure. And I think that, like we've said on here before, there's a lot of different things that affect the amount of real estate transactions that happen. Mortgage interest rates is the clear leader, I think, especially right now. And so if rates come down to 6.25, I think we beat 2024 numbers as far as real estate transaction goes. If they stay above 6.5%, then we're probably on pace to do the same or less real estate transactions. But a lot of it is buyer sentiment. One last thing too is it depends on what the economy does. If unemployment's at all-time lows, if people are just enthusiastic and optimistic about the economy, that can be enough of, a force even in the face of 6.99% interest rate.
Yeah. I think you picked the right number because I think I'm starting to feel like we have empirical evidence. We know, just looking back a couple of months ago, that 6.1, so sub 6.25, to your point, brings back demand. It's not enough to unlock move up buyers, but it is enough to bring back the marginal kind of demand that's just like waiting. And we know with empirical evidence that 7 causes more people to wait. So that spring is being compressed. If we get to 6.25, I agree with you. We will do more transactions in 25 than 24, assuming we get there kind of like by the summer, right? You can't get there on the last day of the year, obviously. But yeah, I just don't know, man. We got a Fed, we got inflation expectations rising. We have a Fed talking about less rate cuts.
And something, what I thought about, Mike? I always have these conversations that live in my head, and then something kind of, you say something or somebody else says something, and I go, you know what? I remember this conversation. The interesting part is this thing that we've never seen. It's unprecedented to have so many people with such low interest rates on real estate. And then there's people that speak and go, you know what? That's an asset. Owning that piece of real estate with a 2.75% is an asset. I'm talking to people, Mike, that aren't even investors. And quite honestly, they're not even big fans of real estate, but they know if I hold on to this asset that appreciates X% over time, California is 6.9% over the last 40 years. That's the average, right? And I have a 2.5% interest rate. I'm paying the debt down. It's appreciating. I've got people telling me, Mike, that like they don't want to keep the house, but they're going to because they know that it's a winner over time. And so people that don't want to be landlords, don't want to be real estate investors are like, I'd be dumb if I sold that house. And I'm not saying that they would be or not, but that's the psyche of the average person. And so extrapolate that over millions of people across the US. 2.75, 3.125. They're holding on to real estate. Real estate is not going to, there's not going to be an abundance of real estate for sale anytime soon. Some people are looking at it and saying it might be 15 or 20 years before some of this stuff gets unlocked.
Yeah, something I'm really proud of that I called very early is there's this notion called turnover. It's like how often is a house turn? And the average for the longest time has been about 8 years. It's why the 30-year mortgage is frankly anchored to the 10-year because the average is 8. But I'm on record saying that we're going to see that go up at least 50% to 12 years and possibly higher. Just these people aren't going to sell. They're going to become what Dana Dunford at Hemlane calls accidental landlords. And you're absolutely right. You got a sub 3% mortgage in a 5% appreciation market. It cash flows like a mother. Why would you sell it? I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah. And so
pretty crazy.
We've got a lot of factors working against, the more real estate transactions in 2025, but we shall see. There's still a lot of data, still a lot of stuff, yet to see. So I'll be here. A lot of the great agents I work with, they'll be here too.
Well, one thing is clear, higher rates do extend the buyer's market that I called weeks ago, maybe months ago now. The closer we stay to 7%, the longer the buyer's markets go. Again, a buyer's market is good news if you are a buyer because you can kind of set the price, terms, all of that. But you got to know your numbers. You got to know what works. And I recommend going to greatmortgagebroker.com to get your process started. Is that the right place to go, Matt?
That's it. Greatmortgagebroker.com. Fill out a quick form. We're in 48 states. The 2 states we're not in, I'll refer you a really, really great person because I've got great people in both Massachusetts and New York. But yeah, have a conversation, get yourself pre-approved, do the work. A lot of, real estate investors are out there willy-nilly. Create your buy box, do the work. And then, just a simple conversation. Okay, based on this credit score, based on this purchase price, if I did a DSCR loan, here's what it looks like. If I did, and I'm telling people all the time, use 7.5%, use 7.25%, whatever it is. For everyone, it's different though. And you don't want to, go stumble across a Zillow, guesstimate of a payment, underwrite a deal, submit an offer, go, oh, I wasn't taking into account taxes and insurance, or I didn't realize that I couldn't put 15% down with that loan type. Like you want to get those questions answered so you're not out there, driving blind.
There you go. Appreciate you, man. Go to greatmortgagebroker.com. Get the process started. Thank you.
Cool.